The construction of the White House. The White House was built on stolen land and by enslaved people, yet it today represents the guardian of democracy and freedom. But what's the story of its construction that they try to hide? Let's find out. In 1791, George Washington chose the site for the president's mansion in the swampy, mosquito-ridden capital that would become Washington, D.C. To give the new republic a palace that rivaled European grandeur, the government held a design competition, which was won by James Hoban, an Irish-born architect who drew heavily from neoclassical styles. Construction began in October 1792. The official story celebrates Hoban's vision and Washington's leadership, but the reality was much darker. This monumental house could not have risen without enslaved Africans who dug the trenches, cut the timber, quarried the sandstone, and carried the blocks by hand. They provided the brute force that made Hoban's elegant sketches a reality, and yet their names rarely appeared in history books. The federal government literally rented enslaved men from their enslavers. Their labor was recorded in payrolls, but the wages never went to them. It went to the people who claimed to own them. Enslaved workers were joined by free African Americans and European immigrants, mainly Irish and Scottish stonemasons, who brought skill and artistry to the project. Together they built the structure, but the terms were far from equal. A mason might earn $1.25 a day, while the enslaved earned nothing at all. When Washington himself approved these arrangements, he effectively sanctioned the contradiction that would haunt the building forever. Liberty was celebrated at the top, while chains rattled at the bottom. By the time John Adams moved into the White House in 1800, the house was barely livable. It was drafty, unfinished, and Abigail Adams famously had to hang laundry in the East Room because there was no suitable space for drying clothes. Still, the building stood as a political statement. America had a palace for its president. But again, the irony could not be escaped. Within its walls, enslaved men and women continued to cook, clean, and serve. The so-called People's House was maintained by people who weren't even recognized as people under the law. The contradictions deepened in 1814 when British troops set the White House on fire during the War of 1812. Once again, it was enslaved workers, alongside immigrants, who rebuilt it. Liberty's house could burn, but it could not stand again without the very people America refused to liberate. That fact alone exposes a truth Americans still find uncomfortable. The backbone of its democracy rested firmly on oppression. The cost of the original construction was set at around $232,000, which today equals more than $6 million. The sandstone was quarried at Aquia Creek in Virginia, with enslaved laborers hauling and shaping the stone. We know some of their names, men like Ben, Harry, and Daniel, but countless others remain lost in the shadows of history, their stories erased while presidents took the spotlight. To this day, the White House is praised for its stately columns and grand halls. But those columns rise from foundations poured by men who had no freedom of their own. For decades, this reality was glossed over, whitewashed in school textbooks and official tours. Visitors learned about Hoban's design, the neoclassical architecture, or how the building survived war and renovation, but not about the men in chains who built it. Only in the late 20th century did researchers uncover payroll records and quarry logs that forced the truth into daylight. Today, there are plaques and acknowledgments, but they are whispers compared to the booming rhetoric of liberty that the building still projects. The White House has become a paradox carved in stone. It is at once the global symbol of democracy and a monument to America's hypocrisy. Every president since John Adams has lived there, from Jefferson, who penned the words, "All men are created equal," while enslaving hundreds, to Lincoln, who struggled to reconcile the nation's sin of slavery, to Obama, whose presidency brought a black family into the house their enslaved ancestors had built. The contradictions run so deep that the White House itself feels like a metaphor for America. Lofty ideals standing on a foundation laid by those who were denied them. So here's a quick question. If the very home of American democracy was built on oppression, what does that say about the true legacy of liberty in the United States?